The lonely sea.
Listen to the vibes.
Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Listen to the Vibes. And I'm very honored to have Mr. Percy Howard here. He's got a new album out. We're going to talk about that. Then we're going to get to know the man. So let's start this off right. Percy, tell us a little bit more about you.
All right. Well, we'll start at the beginning. I'm a singer-songwriter. I'm from Sacramento, California. I'm actually not from Sacramento, California. I live in Sacramento, and I've been here for many years. I grew up on Long Island. But I'm a singer-songwriter that I've made about 9 albums, in the last 20 years or so. Loosely sort of in the genre of avant-pop, avant-garde rock. Played with a lot of interesting players. I'm sure we'll talk a little bit more about that as we get into this interview. In my day job, I'm a psychotherapist. So I'm a licensed clinical social worker, and I am the CEO of a behavioral health consulting organization. So I've sort of juggled music and jobs throughout the years because I have an allergic reaction to total poverty. And in order to be a full-time musician, you can't have that. So that's it. I've got a family, and I've been married for 20 years. I've got a wonderful 15-year-old daughter who's also a musician and an artist. She's a bass player, and she's just now taking a foray into playing the upright and just taking to it, which is great. She's a jazz head. So those are just some, a few little demographic things about me.
Well, this album is a little diversion from what you usually do. So how would you describe the style of this one?
Yeah. Well, the style of this one, this album was meant to kind of have that Southern California, sort of hazy beach moments, suite of love songs kind of vibe. And I think we got to that, the whole year prior to making this album, I was listening to a lot of Steely Dan and who else was I listening to? Weirdly enough, Dan Fogelberg, stuff like this, that I never really, listened to a whole lot. Tim Buckley. It was sort of a big influence over the last 2 years because I wanted to make a really strongly emotional romantic album. Me and my songwriting partner, Ricky Carter. Ricky is a really close friend of mine and a really outstanding drummer who's based in the Bay Area. But Ricky and I wrote, there's 11 songs on this album, and we wrote 8 of them together. 3 of them are covers. We ended up doing a Beach Boys cover. The Lonely Sea. We ended up, what are the other 2 covers now? And now here we are, and I'm kind of drawing a blank. I'll come back to it. But, we ended up having 3 covers and 8 songs that we wrote. But we really spent a lot of detailed time writing these songs. I mean, really thinking about why you're going to have a bridge here. Why the outro is needs to be constructed the way that it is. And so much of my other work has been really highly improvisational and just reactive. I mean, the first album that I did for a label called Materiali Sonori, an Italian label, in '96, featured Bill Laswell on bass, Charles Hayward on drums, and Frith on guitar. And we made that record in 4 days. Not only did we make that record in 4 days, they reformed Massacre, Laswell's band's Massacre, and they recorded a whole Massacre album. So in 4 days, we recorded and mixed my album, and then they recorded the Massacre album. And it was because it was all improvisation. I mean, I remember sitting there in the studio, like furiously writing lyrics when they were just like, jamming. And they're like, okay, that'll work. That won't work. Let's go back and try this again. And it was fun, but even more so, that stuff was fun to play. We did some live shows behind that record, and the live shows were phenomenal. I mean, people were really engaged around it. That music was meant to be played live. Recorded, it was one of those things to where it was a challenge for some people. It was the love-hate situation. People either loved it or they hated it. Okay. And this record, very much different. I mean, it's sort of a pop recording. I mean, there's very little on this record that, is there's nothing that's improvisational and almost nothing that's odd. That doesn't mean that it's like a prototypical pop record, because it's not that, because my voice in the context of this music is different, even so. But this has been a very different, methodical approach. For the first time, I work with a producer, really, Joe Ciccarelli. He's a notable producer, in Los Angeles, in the industry. He's produced My Morning Jacket. He's produced The Shins. He's produced The Strokes. He's produced Alanis Morissette, a lot of different people. And working with a producer was a very different thing, because, having someone's hand in your stuff to shape it when you've never had that is a different experience. But Joe brought performances out of me that I didn't even know I had. I had no idea that I could do some of the things that I did in the context of this music. And I wouldn't have known if I'd have just tried to do it on my own. It wouldn't have been as good, I don't think.
What's your usual process? I mean, you said before it was improvisational, but did you have an actual process to writing these songs?
To these songs, yeah. These songs, like a year before we actually went in the studio, we recorded at legendary Sunset Sound Studios, which, so many great records have been made there. Doors, Prince, Beach Boys, a lot of great records. But a year before we started really mapping out the songs, we were doing demos of these songs months before we got into the studio. And so by the time we got in the studio, not only did we have demos of the songs, we had charts of the songs. And I had never charted anything ever. Okay. So that really gave because Joe brought the musicians, the bass, we had a lot of people played on the album, and on overdubs and backing vocals and a lot of different stuff. But the core band for this album in the studio was Kaveh Rastegar, who's a phenomenal bass player. He's John Legend's bass player for like the last 10 years. Drummer was Matt Chamberlain, who's played with everybody from Bruce Springsteen to Leonard Cohen to a lot of different people. Zach Ray on keyboards, who is the keyboard player for Death Cab for Cutie. And Joe Gore, who's also a good friend of mine, who on guitar, who has been the guitar player for PJ Harvey and Tom Waits and Tracy Chapman. And Joe brought all of these people together as a band, really hearing the demos, he was like, these are the people that need to play this music in the studio. So I didn't choose that. And, I knew Joe, but I met all of these guys literally the day we walked in the studio. So having the charts and them having had a chance to listen to the demo recordings was really invaluable. And, having that experience where you work with top-notch musicians in that studio context, it was amazing. I mean, we sat down, they start playing the music. Boom. No messing around. What do we do here? Blah, blah, blah. They were just able to play the music with the references that we gave them. So yeah, it was a very well managed process. And I wasn't sure, I was kind of, wary kind of coming in, because I've always been a very improvisational musician. But I tell you, I loved it. Like, if, I do another record, it's going to be like that. It's just going to have different players and have a different context. But that process, I like.
Do you have a philosophy on music?
If I have any philosophy on music at all, is it's good if it gives you joy. That's the thing. Because I've always been I've always been a musician that has been a polarizing musician. I mean, I've got a big, soulful, voice. I was operatically trained as a kid. And to try to put it in any sort of pop and context, there are people that are like, oh my God, I've never really quite heard a voice just like that in this context, and I love it. And then there are people who sort of, their whole thing is like, this doesn't work for me. The example I'll give, polarizing voice, Ronnie James Dio, right? People hate Dio and they love Dio. I love Dio personally, okay? Phenomenal voice, okay, to me. But the thing is that the stuff I've made myself that I don't like, I distance myself from it and just walk past it, leave it behind. It didn't hit the mark. That's okay. The stuff that I love and that I feel connected to, I'm happy with. Everybody else doesn't have to be happy with it. It's okay. It's okay.
What did you find most significant about making this album?
I think the most significant thing about making this album to me was that I really discovered that I'm a much better lyricist than I thought I was. Much better lyricist and a much better songwriter, because the lack of improvisational context made us slow down and be very purposeful. So some of the lyrics, on this album, like there's a song called Mulholland. And that song took me probably about a month to write, and it was about a real experience. But the thing is that being able to carefully write that song so it was respectful, okay, because it needed to be respectful and romantic.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, like I like hip hop as much as the next dude, but the misogyny, I can live without, some of that. So the thing is it needed to be respectful, needed to be warm, needed to capture sort of the quirkiness of the moment, like the moment. You can't do that in 5 minutes or 20 minutes or 30 minutes. I had so many cross-outs and do-overs and writing, starting over, doing it again, bouncing it off of my friends. And that whole process, I mean, that was the best thing about it, was really getting into that process and knowing that when you birthed that baby, as it was healthy and, it was exactly the way it should be. I mean, the song was satisfying because you did the work through it. And I just really found that I enjoyed that from a creative standpoint. So I'm looking for, and actually right now, I'm in the process of writing some other songs that are taking that sort of deep, processed, way of working through. I'm working on a project with Joe Gore that's based on the life of the poet Langston Hughes. It's called, the project's called Langston. And so we're working really carefully through the songs the same way. Very satisfying.
What's been the biggest hurdle in your life?
I think the biggest hurdle was, the biggest hurdle and sort of challenge wasn't musically, for sure. It was in my career. I'd worked for several years as a social worker, and I was good at it, but I just couldn't take the misery of it. So it was getting past feeling like, because I was good at it, I owed the people that I was working with sort of my life. Well, it was a hurdle to come to the point I had to get over. You don't owe anybody your life. Okay. You owe you your life, right? And I was becoming a miserable bastard, because of this work was so hard. So extricating myself from it and moving into behavioral health and moving into behavioral health administration, it was a big hurdle, that process, for me to be able to accept that I needed to put myself in a less stressful environment in order to be the best person I could, husband, father, boss, whatever. So kind of crawling over that, and that was like 2003. Okay. That was one of the biggest hurdles, biggest hurdles and challenges, I'd say.
What's been the highlight of your music career?
I can boil that down almost to a moment. We, I think it was in 99 or 2000, I did a show at Aerospace, which was a really cool club in Seattle back in the day. It was one of those, everything's white and stainless steel with like multiple balconies, kind of club, right? And we sold out that show. It was like 1,000 people. There was like probably another 800 people outside that wanted to get in. And that show was one half songs that were written, and the other half, the second half of the show, was improv, and I was basically using my voice like an instrument. And Oz Fritz, who was the engineer, and Oz is a really close friend of mine. He lives close to me here in Sacramento, lives up in Grass Valley. But Oz was manipulating my voice, at the board to sort of play my vocals as I was messing around with my vocals at the same time. Half the time during that show, I wasn't even singing any intelligible language. It was basically just utterances, it was like speaking in tongues. It was a ball. And the thing was, the people were so connected. It was like one of those experiences as an artist that you dream about. Those people were connected to us. And I was concerned before the show started because I'm like, most of these people don't know who I am. They know who these other dudes are, right? And inside of 20 minutes, they didn't care, because they were responding to us as a band. It was also cool because there were some really cool people who came to the show, like Mike Berry from REM and Peter Buck, and Lori Carson from Golden Palominos was there. And just a lot of people came to this show, which is very interesting. But anyway, we did like 3 encores and we got done, and I walked backstage, and Bill Laswell walks up to me and sticks out his hand to shake hands, and he goes, "Well done, doctor." So I asked Fred Frith, I'm like, what does he mean by that? He goes, "He just conferred upon you your doctorate of improvisation." That is a high compliment. Well done, doctor.
Nice.
So that was an amazing moment because Bill's another person. We've known each other for 25 years, and I've admired him tremendously. I mean, that guy, just the library of music that he has created and he's been associated with is astounding. From Herbie Hancock's Rocket to producing Mick Jagger, and just all of the stuff that he's done. And I don't know if you've heard about it, if you know who he is. He's right now undergoing some serious health challenges and might lose his studio in New Jersey. And musicians have come to the rescue through 2 rounds now, and this is like sort of the 3rd round. But this is a guy who is just a consummate musician and artist. So to receive that compliment from him after that show, it's something I'll never forget, for sure.
Let's get back to your album.
Yeah.
Now, why did you name the album what's The Stars and the Well?
Correct. The Stars and the Well. The title, really sort of the genesis of the title, it was me making an attempt to capture that this album, when you really get down to it, is about love in all of its iterations. Okay. So from the heights, of romantic love, the kind of love that you have for your child, that pride, all of those things that are highs, the stars, all of those things, to the well, to losing someone that you love, to someone who you love walking away from you. Okay. To having to be left with the regret and the mistakes, the difficulty and the regret, based on mistakes of people we didn't love well enough, So, The Stars and the Well, captured that for me. And it's not a poem or anything of that nature. I mean, I just sort of grabbed that one out of the ether when you really get down to it. But it was just to sort of capture that dichotomy, but love is at the center of it.
You had one wish, what would it be?
One wish. If I had one wish, okay, this is going to be completely stereotypical. That we just stop blowing up each other and killing each other and doing all this ridiculous crap that human beings do. That creates misery. If I could snap my fingers and stop that, I would. We'd all be like hobbits, man, living in Hobbiton or something. Being kind to each other, eating vegetables. But That's it. That just people would be kind to each other and that there would be less conflict in the world. I mean, it is absolutely a cliche, but I stand by it. I think it's what most people want.
Well, being that you had the stars in the title, it just made me think of Wishing Upon a Star.
Yeah. Yeah. That's it.
But if people want to purchase your album, where can they do so?
Right now, it's available on all the streaming platforms. So, I mean, you can get it on Apple Music. You can get it on, why did I just forget the big one? Shit.
Spotify.
Spotify, Pandora. It's all, and right now, it's only available, for, electronically. People are starting to buy it a little bit now, which is nice. So if we get some demand from like old fans, and I get a lot of contact from old fans about doing a CD run, we might do a CD run. It is released on Third Star Records, 7D Media. That's the label. That's Trey Gunn. Trey Gunn is this stick player from King Crimson. Is the way he's most notable. He's got a nice label that he's put together. A lot of really interesting artists, including Tony Levin, Jerry Marotta, a lot of different people. So I feel honored to be in the company of those folks on that label.
Yep.
So you can also get it directly from 7D. You can download it from 7D as well. And I'm probably going to run some CDs simply because, man, I don't know. I mean, I still have a CD player, I must admit. I like listening to actual product. We thought about LPs. We'll see. If people want them, then we'll make some.
Do you have a website?
I do not have a website, and that's almost painful to say, but I am the most tech challenged dude that you are ever going to encounter. We're working on that. Elliot Goldstein is my manager, and he's dragging me kicking and screaming into this century. So we're working on a website. Right now the connection is through 7D. And my Instagram, Percy Howard Music, is the most woefully. I mean, I've got stuff out there, I think people might find of interest, but I haven't been able to sort of crack that work ethic. People of a certain age, I'll just say that, I'm not going to admit my age, but people of a certain age, man, we hate that shit. I mean, what can you? I can't be posting on IG all the time. So Facebook, I have many more Facebook followers, and I'm more keyed in there. But I think that's a generational thing. And I have people that have been following me and staying in touch through Facebook for like 20, whatever, how long Facebook has been around. But yeah, we are working on a website because we have some ideas. I don't want to spoil the secret now, but we have some ideas about how to do that in a way that will be more interactive and that'll be more satisfying for me. So stay tuned.
Percy, thank you so much for coming on the show, man. I can't tell you how much I appreciate it.
Oh, thank you, Kyle. I really appreciate the conversation, man.
And also want to thank all you folks out there. If you are new to the channel, well, I hope you'll come back. Hit that subscribe button. From our regulars, you guys rock because you make it possible for me to do this. And until the next one, everyone, please take care. Be kind to one another. God bless and peace.